In this tutorial we're going to look at the fill tool. Now normally when you draw a shape you can change the colour of it very easily by using the colour tab on the right hand side. You can either pick from one of the swatches here, and you can also adjust colour in a bit more detail by using the colour wheel, so you can make things darker or lighter. But when you do this, the shape that you're filling is always solid, as in this case is a solid red colour. Now what the fill tool enables you to do is to do gradiated fills. And this is when you've got a fill which runs from one colour to another colour. So to do a fill like that, the first thing you need to do is select the shape you want to apply the fill to, as I've selected this heart here, and then you need to select the fill tool, and that's that bucket at the top. Now once you've selected the fill tool, on the context toolbar here there's a drop down and you can select various different types of fills. So I'm going to start with a simple linear fill. Now you can see as soon as I've selected that, this now has a linear graduated fill, and this in fact is running from red on the left to white on the right hand side. And you can see that those colours are those which are filled in these little nodes on either side of this line. Now you may want to change these colours, and you can do that by clicking on the point you want to change and selecting a different colour. So I can make that blue, for example. And on this side I might want to make that orange. But you can take it a little further than that and actually add additional points along this line. So you can see when you hover over the line you get a little plus sign, and then if you click on that you can see that adds an additional point there. And then I could actually choose another colour that I want at that point, so maybe yellow, and I might add another point here and make that red. And that's in fact the general concept on all the different types of fill types. Whenever there's a line like this, you can actually add additional points. The other thing is after you've added the point, it's very easy to move them around. So I could actually drag this red node, move it into a different position, or this yellow one. And you can actually also move the line altogether, so I can drag these other points around at either end to then get that fill running at whatever angle that I want. Incidentally, if you wanted to move any of these colour points that you've added, when you select them you can then press the delete button and that will then remove them altogether. So that's an example of how you can do a very simple linear gradiated transparency. Now once you've deselected a shape, you'll notice when you select it again you've lost those fill options that we were just looking at, and if you ever need to bring those back you just need to click on the fill tool again. And now you can see I've got my line again in the same position as I left it before. So let's have a look at some of the other fill types you can apply. Let's start with the radial fill type. So now I've selected this. This works in a similar way, other than the fact that this is now going from blue to orange, but it is all blended out to the edge of this circle that you can see around the outside. And in exactly the same way as with a linear fill, when you click on a point you can change the colour. And if you wanted to, along this line here you could add additional colour points. Now again, by clicking on the centre tab here we can move this fill around into any position within the shape. And we can also drag the point on the outside of the circle to shrink it down or make it bigger to give us the effect that we want. It's also worth saying that rather than having to click on the centre point and drag it around, if you wanted to say make the centre point over here somewhere, you can just click the left button, hold it down and then drag out to sort of automatically put the fill where you want. Now the next fill in the list is an elliptical fill, and this works in a very similar way to the radial fill. Again, I'll just click somewhere here and drag it out, but as you can see, rather than being circular, this is actually now elliptical. And the good thing with this is that you can actually then, by dragging this other point here, squash it down or stretch it out to create a disc type effect. Now the next fill is a conical fill. And you can see with this, if I just deselect it a second, that this actually gives a kind of a conical effect where you've got a point in the middle. And if I just select my fill tool again, you can see that this is running from white around to yellow, around to red, down the bottom there. And again, this is fully editable, so I can maybe move this up a bit. So my center point there. I might make this a darker red. Make that red, and I'll leave the top point white. And as we can see, that's produced quite a nice effect. Now the final fill I want to show you is the mesh fill. Now the mesh fill is a much more complicated type of fill, and this, as you can see, has got multiple points all over that shape there. And what you can do here is actually add any point of colour you want on any of these points. So let's say, for example, I made that point yellow. I could make this one green and that one blue. And you can see that it actually blends those colours in between each point. So this is going from green to red there, green to blue there, and green to yellow there. You can also move all of these points around. So just by clicking and dragging, you can create some contours that you want your fill colours to go along. It's worth saying a useful trick with this also is that if you were to drag a box around any points, you can move them together, and you can also change their colour together as well. So with this, I might want to just make that point there white, that point there white, move them up a bit potentially, and that's a very quick way to get some highlights onto any shape that you have. Now there are other fill types you can choose from. The best thing to suggest is just to play around with them, and they all work in a very similar way.